Welcome to the Navigating Solo podcast, a dedicated platform where we explore the unique needs and concerns of solo aging with a focus on empowerment, connection, and proactive planning. I'm your host, Ailene Gerhardt, and today I am excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Peggy Crawford. Dr. Crawford has been a clinical health psychologist for more than 30 years, working primarily with individuals and families navigating the challenges commonly experienced with chronic health conditions. She spent almost 20 years on the professional staff in the Department of Neurology at the Cleveland Clinic, followed by a faculty position at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center and the Department of Neurology at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. In 2014, Peggy and her husband, Denny, a pediatric psychologist, moved east, returning to their roots in Maine and Boston with plans to retire in Maine. Unfortunately, just 1 year later, Denny was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died 18 months later. Since then, Peggy has been transitioning from an anticipated we plan to a much unanticipated me plan for life as a solo ager, drawing from both her professional and personal experiences. Her journey has involved decisions about where to live, what activities to engage in, and how to cultivate new relationships while nurturing existing ones. After navigating the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, rehabbing from unexpected knee surgery, and recognizing her kinless state, a state shared by others, Peggy organized a kinship for the kinless group through her local library, which has been going strong for approximately 15 months. She has also pursued volunteer work at Perkins School for the Blind and co-teaches a brain health and fitness program at a local senior center. In addition, Peggy developed a program called Aging and Thriving. While aging is a given, thriving is an option, which she has presented to much acclaim, both virtually and in person. Peggy, it is truly an honor to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Ailene. I'm delighted to be here. It's a real opportunity. Got me really thinking about things.
Fantastic. I really look forward to our conversation. Why don't we go ahead and jump in? So first, let's start with your experience. How did you come to identify as a solo ager?
I am definitely someone who came to solo aging by circumstance rather than choice. And I realized in thinking about it that it didn't just start with Denny's death. In some ways, this has been it was a transition from the time that he became ill, because he never really was able to function up to his usual physical level. And that made such a difference in our life. He no longer drove. He wasn't able to walk very far. And we loved walking for hours at a time. And within a couple of months, he stopped eating regular food, consuming mostly yogurt and ice cream and protein-enriched beverages. So we didn't really share the same meals, which was just such an important part of our lives. He continued to work as principal investigator on an NIH grant. And he was a primary support person for me. So I think people think, oh, the person who's the primary caretaker is the primary support. And I was for him. But he was also a support person for me, encouraging me to stay active, stay connected to friends, seek whatever support I needed to help me cope with his illness. And I made a point of letting him know that. So I think his death was really another step in my transition to becoming a solo ager. He was also extremely open about his diagnosis and emphasized the importance of staying connected to friends, colleagues, and mentees. And just weeks before his death, he told me that he had decided that he needed to live differently in order to die. And it was an amazing conversation 3 weeks prior to his death. And I think about that every day, that I have this opportunity to keep tweaking my life before my own death.
That is really incredible, taking the opportunity to use it as a a continued teaching experience for others, giving that to others even as he and you were navigating his diagnosis, I think is unbelievable. And
Can I just
also
add one?
sure.
Sorry, just add one thing. I realized that my becoming a solo ager was also in that context of amazing grief,
Mm,
which I've continued to work through over the years. So it's been a companion to
mm.
me, and writing a piece over the past couple of years about anticipatory or incremental grief has been really helpful to me.
And I'm sure helpful to others as you speak about the experience of anticipatory grief, no matter whatever kind of diagnosis or experience people are navigating through. That's an additional podcast conversation um,
Absolutely.
to draw on your lived experience and expertise. But I think it's really important to include as well. Certainly, those experiences and trying to put those pieces together were certainly a challenge at a very emotional time. Are there other large challenges you feel you faced as a solo ager as you're adapting to solo ager? And how, if there are, how have you navigated those? And has your professional background as the health psychologist informed any of that?
Absolutely. It's informed all of the above. Danny and I were not just a married couple, we were best friends. And so we were confidants for each other. And I could talk to him about all kinds of professional things, both being psychologists, that probably helped, but also personal concern. And so I think that was, and continues to be to some extent, something that I truly miss and has been challenging. He was also an extremely good listener and a buffer of sorts when it came to difficulties with my family. And he knew them, so he could put my concerns in that context. And that was very helpful. But over the years since his death, I've become even closer to a number of people that I knew that also knew Denny, but also new people in my life, most of them women who I trust and with whom I feel I can really share anything. And that's of great comfort to me. And sometimes I think in the course of a day about having contact with 3 or 4 of these people. And that is almost amazing to me that it's happening. There are also just so many decisions to make as a solo ager. We were together almost 40 years. And so the sharing of decisions and being able to bounce things off of this other person who was right there, who you could turn to, be it walking through an art gallery or a museum or watching a film or talking about a life problem and getting their input and listening to what you had to say. I think there are a lot of everyday decisions that I now make by myself, but there are also more serious ones with greater consequences, such as where to live. And I made a decision a couple of years, about 3 years after Denny's death, to leave Maine, where I had moved back to after he died in Cleveland. We did a fair amount of moving around in spite of his illness, but in order to be close to a strong support system, we went back to Cleveland. Then I moved back to Maine since that had been our plan. But then I decided after a couple of years that the we plan was to retire and live life in Maine. And it just didn't feel right. I
Mm.
just didn't really want to do it. So I moved back to the Boston area where I'd grown up. And it was as much a hometown to me as any place because I moved around a lot growing up. And so that was a decision I made on my own. And it was interesting. Some people thought it was premature or it was too quickly after Denny's death. But for the most part, people knew I had given it serious thought. But that's the sort of thing that obviously I would have talked to him about in the past. What to do about my career as a psychologist. The
Ah,
plan was I got licensed in Maine. I had followed through with that as we moved back to the East Coast. But then Denny got sick and I never really was able to go back to practicing in Maine, which I had anticipated that I would do. But I've remained licensed in spite of moving and trying to use my professional background in ways that feel good to me, helpful to other people. So I still feel like I'm pursuing life as a health psychologist. And also just the meeting new people and forming meaningful relationships, lots of decision making about that. Also, I had the opportunity after Denny's death to really address the impact that stress had on my health.
mm,
That was particularly striking to me during his illness. I developed this unusual heartbeat, never having had a cardiac problem. It's something called bigeminy and required me to see a cardiologist and have testing and so on and so forth. And also, I had an upper respiratory infection that lasted probably a good 2 months while he was sick. And after he died, I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder how much of this is stress related. I was able to step back, which I was not really able to do. Living with him and supporting him through his illness was a 24/7 job, which I took very seriously and wanted to do. But since then, I've participated in a 2-week meditation and writing retreat where I met two new friends from Canada, and we have remained very close since. I completed an 8-week mindfulness based stress reduction program developed originally by John Kabat-Zinn and continued to practice some of those skills, including yoga. I discovered the practicing every day of three good things, identifying three good things that I was involved in, that I was either the recipient of or just engaged in or initiated. It could be talking to a stranger on the street that felt good and brought smiles to our faces. And I've maintained an ongoing relationship with my therapist, psychologist, who I met in Cleveland just a month or two before Denny's death. And so it's been wonderful to have her, to have that consistency because she knows my history. She knows Denny's history. And I've been open to trying new things. Like she and I did some good work with EMDR, which,
mm,
if anybody hasn't heard of this, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's therapy to alleviate the distress associated with traumatic memories. And I think after Denny's death, I really came to appreciate how much trauma
mm.
I had experienced as he was rehospitalized multiple times and people got to know our names in the emergency room, never a good feeling.
No.
So I think those are some of the challenges that I've faced and some of the ways that I've coped with them.
It really sounds like you benefited from existing support and also seeking out new aspects of support and other things, and also being able to reflect on the impact of your nervous system, those health related issues that were anomalies for you as part of your health history. And I'm hoping that those have been alleviated over time in the work that you've been doing.
They have. Yeah, my heart went totally back to normal.
The physical organ itself, I'm sure, but
Yes,
yes.
yes.
And being able to reflect on that, I would imagine, one, given the closeness and the supportive nature of your relationship, that some of these things would really move you outside of your comfort zone, not only in navigating Denny's death in the literal sense of his absence, but in all of those pieces of missing that support and missing that partnership in the absence of all of those different ways. Are there particular ways that you feel you were additionally forced out of a comfort zone? And was there anything that motivated you to take steps to see how they've impacted your life?
Absolutely. As a child and adolescent, I was extremely shy
Mm.
and have remained an introvert. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being an introvert. But I realized that in order to build additional support for myself, I would need to take some risks, get out there, offer up my time and presence to form new relationships. And this became particularly clear to me, not at the front end of COVID, because being an introvert and I had just moved to
Mm.
the Boston area in May of 2020 when COVID really had taken hold. And I did find really on my own, I was very cautious because I literally was on my own down here in the Boston area. And I thought, I really cannot get COVID. I really want to do everything I can to not get COVID. But I went to the grocery store wearing a mask because I wanted to have contact of some sort with people. But what I was really struck with was when COVID started to improve and people around me, some people that I had now met through the mystery book group and the library and otherwise, people were reinitiating activities and connections out here in the community that I didn't have, being new to the community and being super cautious. So I knew I was going to have to just give myself a shove out the door, so to speak, and make those connections by attending things and getting involved in doing volunteer work and that sort of thing. So it would have been in some ways more comfortable, but I didn't really start to feel lonely at all until things seemed to be normalizing
Uh,
for other people. So that was a real challenge to me. But I just started talking to people, whether I knew them or not, offering my assistance to somebody carrying bags, talking to a crying child to the grocery store who might benefit from a little bit of soothing while their parents was trying to get everything packed up and get the heck out of there. I really then, after I had an unexpected knee injury, which required immediate hospitalization a couple of years ago now, I went my first trip in an ambulance, my first overnight in a hospital ever. And that really brought it home to me how I just didn't really know that many people. And being in the hospital for 4 days on my own with some phone calls with neighbors, I just really emphasized that to me. So that's when I got this idea for the Kinship for the Kinless group and approached the local library about it. And I thought it's worth a try because my guess is I was reading a lot about kinless seniors and solo agers and that sort of thing. And I thought it's worth taking this risk. Even if nobody decides to come and meet, I will have tried. And so I think that's a big part of what I've learned is just try, Peggy. Just, it doesn't have to be predicated on success or failure. It's just the process of trying and having the ideas and seeing them out. And also, I think putting myself out there, taking a risk. I contacted the local senior center because I knew they needed a co-teacher for their brain health program. They didn't know me from Adam.
mhm.
I wrote a long email describing who I was, what I brought to the table. And in less than 12 hours, I had a response from them saying, absolutely, we want to talk to you about this. And now I co-teach this 4-part class. And I've met amazing people, the people who attend the class, the people who I'm teaching with. So it's expanded my support system. And I know through the Kinless group, have a friend that I text every single night at 7 o'clock, because this way we know the other person's okay.
Mhm.
And I feel like I have many things to look forward to. And so I look forward to getting up every day. And a friend recently said to me on the phone, she said, "You sound really happy."
Ah,
And she was right.
that is fabulous in and of itself. I'm sure listeners or viewers, depending on how they're tuning into this, are wondering, okay, so you had that Kinless group event on the calendar and you were just willing to go into it to just try. And what
Right.
happened? Were you all by yourself?
No, actually, I think there were 7 of us at the first meeting. And it's 15 months later. We've continued to meet twice a month for 15 months. We now have 8 members, and 7 of those 8 members are the original members that
Wow.
came to the very first meeting. So I think that says a lot about the group, the people in the group.
Right.
We socialize together. We have potluck. 3 or 4 of us might be interested in the same music. So we go to a concert or we go to the theater. We've been to the ballet, and we are there for each other. Over 15 months, we've come to know each other. We've shared contact information. We check on each other. I think it is, and we provide huge amounts of information for each other, have addressed difficult issues, safety issues, the completion of legal documents,
Wow.
the importance of that, where we've organized for an attorney to come and talk with our group in October to talk about our concerns. So I think we encourage each other. It's so much more than I ever anticipated.
That's a pleasant surprise of an outcome. And I applaud you for taking that initiative. And I know in speaking with you over time, how it's evolved and also what an impact it's made, and also inspired others to think about that as well.
Right.
So it continues to have ripple effects beyond your core group of 8, for sure. In all of these different pieces, end of life planning, without a doubt, and just advanced care planning in general, the notion
Mhm.
of who will advocate for me if I'm able to advocate for myself, whether that's an hour from now or
Right.
at a different point in life. All of those pieces most likely came to a forefront related to Denny's diagnosis and you both navigating that. Did any of those experiences have an impact on your own advanced care planning as you've continued on? We know for sure, as you've said, in discussing the legal document pieces and all of
Mhm.
that with your kinship group and other solo agers, I'm sure that you've encountered, that can be a real barrier, that knowing who to designate, knowing who to talk to about how to make decisions, all of that. Are there pieces you've put into place to address some of these issues? I know people are always appreciative of advice as people are trying to navigate this territory. So if you had any additional advice, I'm sure it would be welcome to listeners.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting because Danny and I had done that planning long before he became ill. But he, in his final few months, he also was very clear about what he wanted, what he didn't want. He donated his body to the medical school in Cleveland. And so those things were taken care of prior to, not on the evening of his death.
Mm.
And so I remember how incredibly stress reducing that was for me to have those steps taken. And so it occurred to me pretty quickly after Denny died, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to designate someone other than him
Mhm.
as my healthcare proxy, my power of attorney. And so I did that. I identified a friend who I was close to up in Maine, and then I was living in Maine too, and other friends as my financial power of attorney, friends who were friends with us as a couple as
Ah,
well. The four of us were very close. I did those things, and I just want to say to people that oftentimes there's an assumption made that those people we designate need to be blood relatives. But in my case, that really wasn't a viable option for various reasons. And it's another instance in life where blood isn't always thicker than water. And so I chose people that I knew well, who knew me, who knew Denny, who I trusted. So I think it's good to look at those options as well, because I think sometimes assuming that it needs to be a blood relative, but feeling uncomfortable with that actually gets in the way of people making a decision.
mm,
And then they don't have these documents completed. The other thing about that is that although I made those decisions initially, I've already made some changes. And then when I moved from one state to another, I had to redo my legal document and took advantage of that to designate somebody else as my healthcare proxy. And we've continued to grow even closer. And she was close to Daddy. And again, that made a difference to me. And so I will continue to realize that those decisions need to get made soon, but that they can be changed.
mhm.
They're not unalterable decisions. And I think sometimes people see it as a one off and it really is not.
The whole notion of it being dynamic, checking in
Right.
with to see that the individuals you have designated are still the right fit for you, if they
Right.
still have capacity to help you out in the way you're seeking, and if anything has changed. I think the other piece you mentioned with Denny's care is that he was clear to reflect on what he wanted as well as what he did not want. And
Right.
sometimes that also can be overlooked. The notion of what I do not want as part of
Mhm.
my care. Sometimes we only think about what are the things I do want. So I think that's instructive as well. And I presume you've used the same sort of reflection and process in
Mhm.
terms of your own planning. All of these things very graciously shared with us as part of this conversation really are all really run at an entire continuum of different kinds of experiences. Are there things that really stand out to you as something you've learned about yourself? Is there anything that's changed your perspective on aging in general that comes up when you think about these different pieces?
I guess I've come to appreciate that I have become a much more patient person, patient than I thought I was. And that's a good thing that may have come with some of the stress reducing strategies. And with that, I think a lot of that really developed during Denny's illness because there was no point in me being impatient with
Mm,
him moving slowly or not eating food or whatever, because I was really trying to really focus on what was most important. And that was whatever time we had together,
mhm.
not whether I got him to eat something. And so I just became very patient during that process. And I've been able to maintain that for the most part since his death and just taking step at a time. Denny was a great editor, so he would do many different versions of everything, slides, chapters, whatever. And so I really worked on honing my editing skills in my life. And so I will think about something, make some notes, write something out, put it aside for a day or two, and then go back to it. And often something occurs to me that had I just done it all in one felt swoop, I would have missed out on. So even being patient with my own process and coming to realize that, and I truly believe this, that it's never too late to work on myself
Hmm.
or to make some changes. And many of those take some amount of risk, particularly with people. So again, putting myself out there, taking the first step, initiating something with somebody, because the worst someone can say is, I really don't want to do that, or I'm not interested, or something. And being pleasantly surprised, that's hardly ever the case. I would say that I never actually thought much about aging. My birthdays weren't like a big deal. People say, oh, this is like a big birthday. And I don't know, that never really occurred to me. I've always felt like I've pursued health promoting behaviors and activities, but I haven't done it because I thought I was going to live longer
Hmm.
because of it. But I hope that the quality of my life would be better and that I would just feel better about myself. And that's a big part of what instigated me to work on the Aging and Thriving
Hmm.
program. Because I think no matter how old people are, there's something about their life or a relationship or a situation that they can tweak that results in them feeling good about
Hmm.
themselves and better about the situations. And all of that's, I like things that are low cost and easy to implement.
Uh-huh.
And those kinds of things really are just being able to encourage people.
Do you want to say any more about the series you've offered that you've crafted in process? Sounds like with some patience along the way, which I think is fabulous and helpful for anyone.
Yeah, I think the Aging and Thriving program, I was initially asked to develop a program of 3 for a local temple because I had been involved in some of their activities, people. And the person who orchestrates all those activities said, Peggy, how about you do a program? And I said, what do you want me to talk about? And she said, oh, you'll come up with something. and I thought, okay. And so I got this idea about aging and thriving because I think people don't necessarily put those two things together as complementary.
Hmm.
And I did a 3-part series. The first part was really talking about aging and how people view that and think about it and what actually happens during aging. And then what does thriving look like? How would you know somebody who
Uh-huh.
was a thriving person? And so what could you do? And then the third part in the series was so now you might want to make some changes. What gets in the way of people doing that? What are hurdles, challenges that you can anticipate? And also emphasizing that no change is too small,
Hmm.
that what people deserve is to have an opportunity to feel like they've accomplished something, have some success, because those are the sorts of feelings that really energize people to keep moving forward and trying something else. So it was a very positively based series.
Hmm.
And so we've done a 3-part virtual program. I've done a 4-part in person program at a senior center. And now I'm coming up with a 90-minute version to do at my fitness center.
Fabulous. It is clearly well received. It's definitely well needed. And I really think it's fantastic that it's been developed and that so many people can benefit from it. So congratulations to you on that. I
Thank
think
you.
it speaks to so many of the different pieces we've talked about along the way. And that notion of taking a step, we refer to them
Right.
as small steps sometimes, but whatever small means to you. When I talk to people about planning, and it's an overwhelming process of thinking about where am I going to live? What am I, all of these different pieces.
Yes.
Sometimes the first step is putting a pen next to a pad of paper, walking away and being ready to re embrace that pen and pad of paper whenever you're ready on your timeline. Really like that notion of whatever that piece is for you to stick with it. And of course, your advice that always offers usually gets you on a thread of momentum and then can make an impact from there. But you've shared a lot of things personally for which I am very grateful. I thought we would shift gears just a little bit in that pie in the sky kind of thinking. If there's a skill or a talent that you could instantly master, what would it be and why?
The thing that comes to mind immediately is I would like to continue to develop my writing.
Hmm.
The writing that I've done, particularly since Denny died, has been really very therapeutic to me, and I've shared it with friends. I would love to publish my piece on incremental grief because I've shared it with people and they say, "Oh, you should get this published." So I would like to do that. And this may sound funny, but in honor of my dad, who was a master teller of jokes,
Ah,
I would like to be able to tell jokes without laughing before I get to the punchline.
aha. Are you an improv person? Would you sign up for an adult ed improv class or a
Oh, that's
town
interesting.
improv class or something that might help with that timing to not break before before the punchline is delivered?
I hadn't
Um,
thought about that, but that does plant a seed.
that will be another future my adventures into my a future podcast episode, my adventures in improv. I think that's really fabulous. However, that turns out honoring a parent that way and also just thinking about different skills that you have an interest in. To wrap up our conversation, which could definitely go on much longer, I'm sure. In fact, I know. Is there a piece of advice along the way? I am sure professionally, personally, life experience wise, you've been given advice all along your life's journey. Is there anything particular that stands out that you'd want to share or offer to listeners? Maybe something related to solo aging or maybe something not.
Yeah, I think it's something that's really just helped me over the past 7 years since I've been officially a solo ager. But that is really asking what my gut is telling me about a situation or circumstances, and then listening to it. And I think knowing that it's okay to go with my feelings rather than my thoughts.
Mhm.
I've been a pretty sort of cerebral person, I think, most of my life. But I had this experience actually just recently when I was thinking about my license, my psychology license. And I don't see patients anymore. It's more that I'm applying
Mhm.
my expertise and knowledge to these projects. But somebody said to me, "What does your gut tell you? Renew or don't renew your license?" And I had it in a heartbeat. I said, to renew. So whether I practice or not. So I think it took another person mirroring for
Mhm.
me, but giving myself permission really to go ahead and just renew your license, Peggy. And I did.
That's wonderful. And being able to apply it and your professional experience to the work you're creating, developing, facilitating, and
Mhm.
connecting, I think is really a benefit, certainly to you, and really others really get to benefit from that as well.
I want to just add to that sort of acknowledging to myself that sort of translating my years of experience and being a psychologist into these new paths, these
Mm,
new avenues is not less than what I did when I saw patients.
it's different. Standing on its own difference, but not applying any kind of sliding scale to that of any kind. It's truly been a pleasure speaking about all of these different pieces. I am so grateful to you for sharing your experience, very personal experience with Denny and sharing him with us. I think that's another way to share his experience and share him with others and give him the opportunity to make further impact from what it sounds like he certainly did in his life. So I am very grateful. It's likely that people will hear all kinds of things that you shared and possibly want to connect with you. And so what we'll do to make it as easy as possible is if anyone who does hear this or see this has an interest in sharing feedback or asking a question, you can simply send an email to podcast@navigatingsolo.com, and we will make sure to get it to Peggy without delay. So that way she has the opportunity to respond how she may wish. So thank you for that. And thank you for the continued availability that way. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Navigating Solo podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And as always, as I mentioned, if you have any questions, ideas for who you might like to see be a guest, or topics you might like to see covered, you can email the podcast at podcast@navigatingsolo.com. So, as I say at the end of each episode, until next time, stay empowered and stay connected. I'm your host, Ailene Gerhardt, and this is the Navigating Solo podcast.